Welcome back to the Pathfinders podcast, where we share the remarkable stories of pretty cool folks on their adventures through their personal and professional lives. So we're going to talk about two main things, build this off of the Pathfinders methodology, career maps, and a personal board of advisors. The career map puts together our plan, where we've been, where we're at, where we want to go, and the 5 dimensions of the career map, the positions we held, the skills, education and certs, achievements and accomplishments, and some of the fun stuff along the way as well. And then once you have that plan in place, how do you share that with your personal board of advisors, those multiple mentors along the way, guiding you in various aspects of life? We might refer to this as a PBA. So we're going to share this on LinkedIn and the other podcast platforms. Please comment, like, follow. And today's guest, favorite quote, "Before we were a nation of laws, we were a nation of men." That was by Joseph Ellis, but our guest today is Jason Seiden. He's a communications and leadership consultant. He's a guru, right? Successfully exited entrepreneur, so always learning from these kinds of folks in my position. Published author of 2 career books, so he's been a mentor on the career side as well, on the book front. First LinkedIn certified consulting partner in North America, and once upon a time was the executive producer of rollingstone.com. No big deal. Safe to say that Jason has an atypical career story. Fun fact, builds on that piece. I want to emphasize executive producer of rollingstone.com. So Jason, let's go ahead and dive in, talk more about your story. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. And I got to tell you, like words like remarkable and guru, like I'm wondering who you're talking to. So I appreciate it. I will try to live up to like 20% of the hype.
All right. Hey, if you get us close to that, that'll be helpful. The first question that we always ask is, what'd you want to be when you were growing up? Young Jason.
Yeah, right. Young Jason wanted to be either a plastic surgeon helping people, burn victims and people who had any kind of major issue, or wanted to. I actually just found my college essays. I found the Apple IIe that I'd written my college essays on, and what I wrote about then was carryover from a childhood dream. I wanted to discover a way to eliminate plastic waste.
Whoa. Okay. So plastic surgery to plastic waste remediation. Okay.
Yeah. Somewhere my parents must have been watching The Graduate, and I must have heard plastics somewhere in the back of my brain because it was a repeating theme. And then I did nothing like that when I got older.
That's okay. That's, believe it or not, that's how most of these shows kick off, where they say, hey, I was this, I was that. We've had a lot of aspirational NBA players, actually. So I always find that pretty cool. Whenever you got to the college age, what did you decide to focus your studies on? Right? Was it in the healthcare field? Was it in the sustainability field?
No, I studied business. So I went to
the same thing. Yeah.
Right. Same. I went to Wharton as an undergrad. And my thinking, I remember talking to the admission. I remember that process because I remember talking to the admissions counselor, and she looked at me. She's like, "Wharton's for people who know the stock price of Xerox and care." And I'm a writer. I'm an artist, hiding out in a business person's life. And she's like, "Why do you want to do this?" I said, "Because I'm remarkably curious. I read all the other stuff. Like I will self-educate on everything else." And even when I got to college, I did. My roommate took a music theory class, and I read his entire textbook and I listened to all the stuff. Business was, to me, like this was how the world worked. This was the mechanism of getting stuff done. So I knew if I was going to be naturally curious about the stuff I loved, I really probably should augment that with an understanding of how to turn it into something. And so that's how I chose where to go to school. And then you get into Wharton, you're done. That's where you go.
Congratulations. So one of the questions I like to ask here is, a lot of people put stuff into their toolbox in those college years, and there's a whole lot of opportunity in the Philadelphia-based institution. What stayed in your toolbox from those college years? You mentioned, I love that quote, right? Artists hiding in a business person's life. Talk to us a little bit about the thing. Maybe it was in classes, maybe it was outside of classes.
You just put your finger right on it. So first of all, there was a lot of stuff I did that it was just a mistake. Like I just screwed up a lot of stuff. I racked up a lot of experiences that I was able to learn from in hindsight.
Mm-hmm.
I had a group of friends. I had an international group of friends where if I went out with 14 people, I was the only one who grew up speaking English in the house. I had my other group of friends. I had a fraternity. They looked a lot like me. Where I put my emphasis, choosing not to, like, it was great to dabble across all those areas. But as I got older, I realized kind of more about where I belong and who I treated well, who I didn't treat well, how, so I kind of was watching myself go through it. And so that's kind of like high level, but just, hindsight's always 20/20. I wish I would have spent more time with the international people. I think I would have been kind of a better, more well-rounded person all the way around. I would have had more to offer to my fraternity brothers. I would, but I didn't know how to do that without, there was always the FOMO. It's like, well, if I'm over here, I'm not over here. And I didn't handle all that well. I didn't make a lot of really good choices all the time. And so, but I had these incredible experiences that when I got a little more mature after college, I could look back and go, got it. I'm glad I did that. Let's move forward. But there's one thing that really did stand out. I had an international relations class, and our TA had a chip on his shoulder. And I decided that I wanted to be right instead of get what I want one day. By the way, this could vie for favorite quote. Like, you can be right or you can get what you want. Probably not both. So he made a mistake in one of the workshops, and I called him out, and it was whatever it was. So fast forward, I get my final for the semester, and it's been misgraded. Correct answers, objectively correct, just marked wrong. And because of that, I get a C in the class instead of the A that I had earned. Yeah. So I go see the professor. The professor says, look, the TA grades this. You got to talk to the TA. I call the TA. The TA says, I will meet you. No problem. I'm sure I made a mistake. I'll meet you at 4:00, right at this building, gives me the office. I go to the building. The building closed at 2:00. I'm like, okay, I just got completely screwed. And that was when I learned, you might be right. It doesn't mean that you really should act on it. And wow. that was a huge life lesson.
Did the grade ever turn around?
No.
Oh my goodness.
No.
I would have framed that.
Right.
Put that up on the wall. This is a life lesson.
Yeah. I mean, that one, it's, there were a lot of life lessons, right? Like, you can get the grade or you can get the education. They're not aligned. You can be right. You can get what you want. Those are not always aligned. Not everybody who's supposed to be looking out for you is. People's egos get in the way. A little bit of power and ego, hard combination. Like, be careful. So there was a lot that I learned. One thing that I'm proud of myself for not leaving behind is it didn't make me afraid to push back moving forward in my life. I recognize the risks and I try to be careful about them, but it didn't create a fear in me that was like, whoa, I gotta, toe the line every single time here.
So upon graduation, you've done some pretty cool stuff. And I really want to dive deep today on your unique, atypical career adventure, right? We call it a journey, but let's upgrade that journey to an adventure right now. So talk a little bit about that to us, the career map part first, and then we'll get into some of the guides you had along the way.
Yeah. So I graduated college in 1995. So there's this little thing called the internet that is taking the world by storm, right? Yeah. Some of the people watching this might be aware of it. A friend of mine had a bookstore, and I joined him, helped him run this bookstore, and we built a website. We took orders through email in 1994, which was the whole internet in 1994 was like Twitter in the early days, where you kind of knew all the people who were on it,
Yeah.
So when I graduated college, I came back to Chicago, and I started developing websites for small businesses, and fairly soon got connected with somebody who had just raised a bunch of money and was working with a concert promoter in Chicago to broadcast concerts over the internet. And this is back in the days of 56K baud modems, so way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
That company then did a deal with Rolling Stone magazine, and so we hosted the online version of Rolling Stone.
Whoa.
And picked up some other music sites, Downbeat Jazz, The Source. I mean, this was wild. So we've got concert promoters and editorial that we're trying to balance. That was fun. We had some of the first digital downloads. It was wild. So I found myself the executive producer of the site. What that meant was I had a team of 25 people who were responsible for integrating all the stuff that was happening across the company, from sales and editorial and tech. And we had partners who wanted us to use their particular technologies, and we were responsible for the final product. So 20 to 25 million unique visitors a month. And, I'm like in my late 20s. I'm like, what is happening here? Yeah. So that was the first job. So I graduated. So just to put this in perspective, I graduated Wharton, did not go into consulting, did not go to Wall Street. I came back.
Gosh, you were a failure. Yeah.
Started my own thing. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And so who was guiding you kind of during that late 20s phase of your career? You're doing this remarkable stuff, probably making some money along the way as well. And at some point you said, okay, I need to go to the next step of my professional journey. But who were some of the people that were guiding you? Where'd you find them, Jason?
All over, right? Okay. So early days. So I've received remarkably little good advice in my life.
Oh, cool.
Like shockingly, most of it's been around like little newborns. But one of the pieces that was good and helpful was, don't worry about your first job. Your first job doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So I had people guiding me in college, and I couldn't connect. I couldn't relate. So, I was talking with one guy who was on Wall Street, and just the way he was describing the job and the way he was describing the path, I'm like, there's nothing about this that feels right for me. Mm-hmm. And so I had to step back and look at the people, look at the peer group. And I'm like, I like these guys. These are good guys, but these are not my guys. These are not my people. Consulting, I didn't have as many people to really help me navigate that area. So I came to the same conclusion, but ultimately may or may not have been right. You never know if you're doing the deep due diligence. So then I stepped into the internet world, and it was the Wild West, right? This is brand new. So there's a raging debate. Is this changing economics forever? Is this a fad? Is it just a new technology, but all the same economic dynamics hold? And that was undecided. That was unknown at the time. So I had people in my life who really took all sides of that. In Chicago, just the culture here is very nuts and bolts. So I had people in my family and people who had been in my life who were like, don't pay attention to this, do something meaningful. The guy I worked with obviously was making a huge bet with the internet. And I met some incredible people who I worked with, and they had come from all these different areas. So we just sort of like banded together, held hands, and were like, we have no idea what's going on. Let's just do this together.
Yeah.
So they were all around me, and I really didn't feel like I understood enough to know who was good or bad. So there was a lot of like thematic, what's the theme here? Do I vibe with it, in or out? And then when I'd find an in, I just sort of was an open sponge, and I'm like, yeah, okay, you have a totally different background than me. We're in the same boat. Let's go.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was like two of the people who I worked with there, they became the first two employees at Napster. One of the other guys I worked with now is, he's a senior executive at one of the major agencies. These guys have all gone off to do incredible things. But at the time, we were just a bunch of jokers, pulling all-nighters, trying to get a website out the door.
Mm-hmm. It's remarkable how many people got that big start, and a lot of people that got that big flop in those late 90s, right? You think about the founding team of PayPal, right? And where all those folks went. So it seems like they're kind of learning from you. We're going to do a quick aside here. So a lot of folks listening will be thinking, hey, I want to start my own business. I want to be an entrepreneur. And whatever they call me, I usually try and talk them out of it, right? And say, do you really want those sleepless nights? Do you really want to have way more stress and way more frustration and have no idea of what's coming next? Because if that's what you're looking for, then great, sign up, do it. But any advice that you might have to somebody who's thinking to go into building their own business?
I am brain damaged like all of them, so I'm the last person who can give. Yes, the advice is don't do it. All of us at a certain age, we get jobs where the job is to hold the stress. That's your job. As a leader, your job is to hold the stress so everybody can sort of like blissfully believe in tomorrow, and as an entrepreneur, there's a fine line between painting a vision and telling a lie. And not everybody is comfortable painting a vision, because the reality is that you are making a bet on the future, and you don't have a crystal ball. You are going to use willpower and the resources at your disposal to try to create a path. And you're going to convince people that you have a better than even shot at being successful, if A, B, and C happen and if they help you. The reality is you have no control over that. So not everyone's comfortable kind of living into the future like that. And if you're not, do not do it, because the stress of holding that stress I used to have a full head of hair. The other piece of it is like, there will be nights where you will turn an unnatural shade of green because you will not know how you get through the next day. That will happen. And when you start the entrepreneurial journey, you tend to be like, hey, if I fail, no problem, which is true. When you get into the entrepreneurial journey and all of a sudden people are relying on you and they start believing in your vision, and you realize, whoa, if this doesn't go well, it's not just me that gets impacted. It's all of these other people and their families.
Yep.
That's the piece that I think people underestimate. So if you want to do it when you're young, do it before you have, kids in college and, do it young when your obligations are lesser, and go in eyes wide open. If you're built for it, you know it. If you're not, if you're wondering, you might not be built for it. And
I think this is a great place to have your personal board of advisors, right? And one of the roles that we may add in the second edition or third edition is a cheerleader, right? Who's that person that you call and you're like, man, I am down in the dumps. It's kind of sort of the accountability partner today who checks in on you for you. But to have that, and I have those people around me, right? By no means has this been an easy journey, and we're not at the top of the mountain yet. But to have those folks that say, hey, Jason, I know why you started this. And this is what you told to me. And you wrote it down in that little notebook that you had over there. Go open that notebook. Go remember why you started this thing, And so I think it's important to have those kinds of folks. And it's okay to have down days. And you build that relationship with everybody on your board, right? So that you have that trust, respect, rapport. You can be vulnerable in the good times and the bad times. That's critical in all advisor relationships.
Yeah, it's truth. You need somebody who's going to tell you the truth. And as recently as last week, like I reached out to somebody, I'm like, this is what's going on. And the answer is either like, yeah, that sucks. That's a hard week. Or, that's tough. Here, try this. Or sometimes the answer is, you're being a whiny little bitch. Shut up.
Yeah.
And you need people who can know the difference and then tell you right, which one it is. And you're exactly right. But that board of advisors, that personal board of advisors for an entrepreneur, it is more critical than anything, because when you're leading, when you're alone, you're alone. People, wonder what courage feels like and what leadership feels like. I will tell you right now, it feels like fear.
Mm-hmm.
Because courage is acting in the face of fear. Oh my gosh, the consequences are real. If I'm wrong, people are going to get hurt. I'm doing it anyway.
So you got past the fear, you had the courage, and you got a big W in there. Let's talk a little bit about what that was like, right? You said you successfully exited as an entrepreneur. Let's talk about some of the highs along the way, right? There are cool things that can happen on this entrepreneur, believe it or not, right? Yeah. It's not all just nightmares and terrible dreams.
No, so I'll jump you forwards, right? So life has gone on. That job turned into consulting for 10 years. I was with a firm. I split off. I hung a shingle. I'm doing 2008 happened. So I had to retool my business, a lot of social media training for leaders. That triggers a phone call from LinkedIn. Hey, we are on a growth path. We need outside help to own the consulting piece of this. You're doing great stuff. You're driving adoption.
Let's just pause that for a second. High five. LinkedIn calls you. They say, you're great. We need you to help us. So that's another feather in your hat. So again, the other lesson learned here is when cool stuff happens, make sure you pause for a second. And you've probably celebrated this at multiple points along the way. But also, guys and girls, listen to what you're saying. If you're the mentor, the mentee, the one sharing advice or asking for advice, when cool stuff happens, pause, be like, hey, give those high fives, right? That is remarkable. Those are also really cool things to write down in that why you're doing this. Celebrate some of those wins, because whenever you're going back to review the why I did this, review some of those wins. So on those dark and dreary days, you're like, aha, I am on this journey and cool things have happened. Keep going.
You know what? It's a really good point. So one of the things, I'll just to finish that aside, when you're pushing yourself, what I have found is when I'm pushing myself, I am living at the edge of my abilities, which means I am constantly bumping up against what I can't do and trying to expand it.
Yep.
And it's really like you turn around and you look at what you have done. That's behind me. I've already done that. I'm pushing the envelope here. You're so right. Like the rest of the world tends to look at what you do. They're not looking at you bumping against the edge of your abilities. They're looking at what you do at your core of abilities. So it's like this little mind shift that you have to do to celebrate. It's important to do that. So I had that, that became a piece of technology because you can imagine the clients were kind of too big to reach through consulting. Mm-hmm. And this was really interesting. My co-founder, who I'm now married to, we were approached by a third party for an acquisition. We negotiated an acquisition that fell through. When you have a small business and you have an acquisition that falls through, it's really hard to get things back going. So I had a month back then where my mantra that month, after we tore up the deal, my mantra was no big decisions, no sharp objects, just keeping it easy for 30 days, just reset. And Lisa actually engaged another company, themuse.com out of New York. And we started a conversation with them. They were interested. We did a pilot, and ultimately they acquired the business, which was unbelievable. And it was great. I mean, we went through the whole process, and I mean, it's kind of a whirlwind while you're going through it. Nobody tells you what procurement looks like or what due diligence looks like. And then, you run into an attorney, a real attorney, and you get the documentation of what you have to send. And are you kidding me? There's 7 of us. What, and I just remember being on the phone with attorneys, how do I put NA under most of your, this was copied and pasted. You guys are clearly used to buying technologies for healthcare companies that have PII and, SOC 2. We don't have any of this. I don't even know where to put that we don't have any of this here. And it was just a lot of laughs, a lot of fun, but I had to like maintain that perspective, because it would have been real easy to look at this thing, been overwhelmed, and be like, how do we do this? But yeah, ultimately we got it over the finish line. We got it sold. And I was able to take a breath, and that was kind of nice.
Well, congratulations. And for whatever reason, you decided, I'm not going to stop there. And I'd like a little bit less sleep in my life. So the non-traditional path continues, a little bit more communication consulting, and a little bit more work around the passion project as well. So talk to us a little bit about, and also add in the tidbits of, why a book, and then why 2 books? Because that's, people usually say, hey, I want to start a business. I try and say no. Then people say, well, I want to write a book. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to try and talk you out of that as well. Talk to us a little bit about the books, and then kind of the passion bits.
So, you mentioned this earlier. I've had more of a story. So my career path has really been a career story, and I've written about that. And when I think about sort of the things that go into knowing your path, I've leaned heavily into skills, and specifically I've leaned heavily into communication. I find it fascinating that the way we speak really shapes the way we think, and shapes what is then possible. The first book came out of me sending a frustrated 2 a.m. snarky email to one of my personal board of advisors, who was getting an EMBA at the time. And he sent a note back a couple of days later, said, shared your note with the back row. We all love it. I'm like, the back row, these are my guys. And I'm like, I got to do something for my people. And I literally I went into my home office, and 2 weeks later I had the core of a book, and shared it with some people in the industry. It was like, yes, do this. So I took 2 more weeks, cleaned it up, and I had How to Self-Destruct, Making the Least of What's Left of Your Career, which was my way of kind of giving a friendly backhand to all these people who are really smart when they sit with a coach and talk about things, but then they get in the moment, they can't do any of it.
So reminder, anytime you're talking to people on your PBA, to actually take action, right? If somebody's going to be so kind as to give you some perspective, action items, homework, whatever it is, take a little bit of action, whether it's a coach or your functional mentor, cross-functional mentor, definitely the accountability partner. Take some, and if you don't know what to do, or you just ran out of time or something, ask for clarification. And don't, I've been there. I've been at fault for, Jason, I kind of didn't really have time. I didn't have time. I didn't get to this thing. Let's resync on the next one. So big emphasis on that point right there.
Yeah. Awesome call out. And then, so the second one fell from that. So I didn't sit down and be like, oh, I need to write a book because it's going to help me establish my credibility in this industry. It was, wait a second, I have a skill. The output is actually appreciated. It fits with where I want to go. It helps me broaden my my relationship with communication skills, in this case, by writing a long form book.
Yeah.
Done. Right. And then I was invited to write a second one, and I did. And I didn't really love that experience, so I didn't write a third. But
not yet. At the time of this recording, it doesn't have plans, right? This is documented. The plans change, right?
And so, and the same thing now. So fast forward, sold Brand Amper mid-teens. I'm still going to work. And like, I wish I would have sold for some of the numbers that, you mentioned PayPal. Like, that would have been nice. But, I found I had a knack for driving adoption, right? So one of the things that I did, because I've got this story and I'm aware that I make these shifts, one of the things that I would do, and I did this after we sold, is I either would call up my clients, or I'd have somebody call my clients on my behalf. And I always ask the same question. Last few years, I know what I've been selling you, but what have you been buying?
Interesting.
And what I learned from that process after selling the business was, what people had been buying was the user adoption process that we had used to get people engaged. The technology was nice, but the real value was that we could actually engage employees and get them to take the action. And a lot of our clients realized that if they use that same methodology elsewhere, it applied. So I'm like, oh, well, what if I lean into this? And I made some calls, and I ended up spending a few years, well, still doing that, right? So working with companies, how do we drive adoption? Are we driving adoption amongst customers? Let's look at how we're marketing. Let's look at that. And then the curiosity comes out, like what gaps do I need to fill? What's working? What are we not working on? Where is the organizational, design kind of get in the way or lead us to think of things in a particular way where we need to think of them differently? Same thing internally. So to me, I'm like a kid in a candy store. Every time I go in, it's just like, ooh, like let's learn, right? And by asking questions, the solutions kind of become apparent.
I think that's another thing. While you're taking a pause there, I'm going to rudely interrupt once again. Whenever people do decide to not listen to our advice of not doing the entrepreneurial thing, I think a lot of people fast forward past the measure, and then cut, right? Asking those questions, and it's wild how people will go through it. And I've been at fault for this before too. Hey, we're going to build something, and then try and sell it without getting the voice of the customer along the way. So really delaying that finding of product market fit kills a lot of those early businesses, I think. So even if you're able to say, hey, here, what do you need? What does that look like? How much would you pay for that? Okay, hey, ask them. Wild concept. Pay me that money now, and then I'm going to go and build it and give it to you. Right? What's the worst they say? No.
It is
nuts concept.
You know what? Because when you're in the moment, you want to hold on to the excitement, and that's dirty. That's in the weeds. That's in the mud. That's not exciting. That's not in the clouds. That's in the ground. That's grounded.
Yeah.
So, but that's where you're exactly right. That's where the magic is. And that brings us current with the Passion Project. I mean, I'm still doing communications consulting and helping organizations get their message out, bring transparency, into the organization in ways that maybe they didn't think was possible. But along the way, I had a personal tragedy. So I lost my older daughter, in 2018, and I was like, look, I can't help be a guy who lost his kid. Like that happened. I don't want to be the guy who lost his kid. That's totally different. And while I was kind of thinking about this, I had this remarkable experience. I got very lucky. I had an epiphany. I had like the clouds parted and the cherubs played their harps, and I had this epiphany. And what it felt like was just pure appreciation. Like, here, I've just lost my daughter, and I'm sitting there going, wow, like this child came into my life. Her birth expanded my capacity for joy beyond what I thought possible. Her death has expanded my capacity for grief beyond what I thought possible. How do I feel anything other than appreciation for this human who has given me more ability to live my life? And then your brain goes into this wild dual place where you're like, you can't be happy about this. And I'm like, ooh, it's not happy, it's joy. And like, that's even worse. You can't be joyful. Like, you have to be miserable and show the world how important she was by showing them you can't go on. I'm like, no, actually, I think it's the opposite. I think I honor her by living the most I possibly can and taking advantage of this gift.
Yeah.
And so I spent like 5 years trying to think about how to help other people have that. And I finally, with the help of Lisa, I realized I can't. Like, we are all on our own journeys, but you know what I can do is I can help people get out of each other's way.
Yeah.
I can help clear the path. We all work with organizations, with other people who don't know what to say, who get in our way, who even with the best of intentions, create an environment that doesn't allow us to move forward. So the Passion Project, Comfort Communications, is really about helping organizations support employees by helping them activate peer-to-peer communication in a way where people just know what to say, when to say it, who to say it to, how to coordinate with each other to get it done. Super simple stuff. And I'm actually using some of the techniques that you just talked about, to work with the team to bring it to market. Like, we're not pushing. It's not pie in the sky stuff. It's like, hey, has this happened to you? Would this be helpful? What's this worth? What was the cost of all that awkwardness? And how many hours did your leadership team spend cleaning up the mess? And did you lose an employee? Like, what was the cost of the turnover? And we're having those conversations because then we find that creates pull through. So I don't have to push a boulder up the hill. Like, I'll know where the audience is, how big, all that stuff. So it's slow. It's a passion project, right? It's not the main course here, but all those things that I've done kind of set me up, I feel like, to work on this and do it in a way where my ego's not going to get in the way. My excitement's not going to get in the way. It's important to me. And I think I finally have the maturity to actually see it get done.
We're here cheering you on along the way.
Yeah, thanks.
Jason, I took a couple of notes here. I'm going to do a quick summary here in just a moment. Is there one closing thought or piece of advice that you might want to share with folks who have listened up to this point?
What you are telling people to do with a personal board of advisors, I think I wish I would have gotten that message earlier. There were times in my career where I kind of figured it out by hook or crook or did it informally. And when you do that informally, your ego gets in the way a lot. Yeah. You dismiss. So having people with like, look, you are my accountability person. Like, you are going to tell me the truth. I might not like what you say, but I have committed to doing what you say, right? It is so important. And sharing men are naturally bad at this, or the men that I have experienced are naturally bad at this. I've learned a lot. I mean, it sounds so wild, but like, biology is biology. I have learned a lot watching how women tend to speak more, talk more, share more than the guys in my life. And I mean, I'm speaking in broad generalities. That's something we can all do more and better of. Sharing the ups, sharing the downs, listening when someone shares with us, right? And that's a different topic. But for ourselves, making sure that you have people who will listen to you and will give you that feedback. Pete, you've said it a few times, a few different ways. I couldn't agree more with the power. Everything that I've done, I've stood on the shoulders of giants, and I've done it with the help of somebody who has lent me a hand.
We're not alone. Jason Seiden, thank you very much for sharing with us today. While you were on the move, you had young dreams of helping people as a plastic surgeon, to then plastic waste remediation and reduction. But you didn't do that whenever you got to Wharton. You did, in fact, go into being an artist hiding in a business person's life. And you learned a lot from the melting pot of mistakes that made the man you are today. You loved your class on international relations, and you learned the hard way, right? Hard knocks. You can be right or get what you want. You were one of the OG internet dudes and built some websites in Chicago in the mid-90s for small businesses. You hosted an online version of Rolling Stone. You had the concert promoters, the editorial in there, and digital downloads, and that's still kind of tough for some people today. Advice, right? Don't worry about your first job. Good people are not always my people. A great gig might not be the role for me. Leaders learn how to hold the stress, and top-notch entrepreneurs walk the line of painting the picture of what's possible in the future versus telling a lie. Not everybody gets it right. We've seen some stories and movies about that over the last couple of years. Lots of news articles as well. We do need those advisors and guides who not only know what to tell us, but also when to tell us, not just what we want to hear. Jason, you're truly a living example of success is found on the other side of our comfort zone. So the reminder to stop and smell the roses and appreciate and celebrate the wins is huge. Also, whenever things are tough, 30 days of no big decisions and no sharp objects is A-okay. And we heard that throughout your career path, story, adventure, with the emphasis of skills along the way. You knocked it out of the park with your knack for driving adoption, exited the business, 2 books, and you asked the clients, I really like this one, I know what I sold you, but what value have you been lying? And then the loss of life fueled the aspirational appreciation into what you're doing. So please, everybody, take a moment to ask Jason about comfort communications, of knowing what to say and when to say it. Thanks, Jason.
Wow. Thank you.